Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee McKenna. I'm a therapist and shamanic healer. And today I want to talk about the divine feminine, the Christian form of Mary, and that Mary was not a virgin. I've had a long and complicated relationship with the divine feminine and with the idea of femininity in general, including my own continually difficult relationship with being a female myself. I was the only child of a sick and weakly mother. She was very bright, but incredibly fearful and codependent. She was quite manipulative, and from my perspective, was subservient and disempowered. By the age of 4 or 5, I had already decided I wanted nothing to do with her model of being a woman, and tried to model myself as much as I could after boys and men. I had almost no role models for womanhood that were interesting to me at all. And though I wasn't raised religious, I was allowed to go to church with my different girlfriends growing up. And my closest friends for most of my childhood was a pair of sisters who lived right next door to me, Chrissy and Robin. I went to public school, they went to Catholic school, but I have more memories of my childhood at their house than I do at my own. And on Sundays, for years and years, we went to 10 o'clock Mass at Immaculate Conception Church. I don't remember a thing they said there, but I did like the smell of the sage, and they rang bells a lot, which was really cool. And I would stay sitting in the pew like a good little non-Catholic while my girls went up to take communion. I was what I would call a cultural Catholic. It was the dominant religion for most of the Irish and Italian families that I grew up with. And my father went to Catholic school all the way through college. He was devoutly non-religious, but his mother, my grandmother, Ida LeClaire LaValle, was a holy water in every doorway Catholic. One of 13 children from Quebec. Ida was a hoarder, and I cleaned out her apartment after she passed, and I think there was something like 27 statues and framed pictures of the Virgin Mary, including some of those really crazy 3D ones. And neither my grandmother nor the Virgin Mary held any interest for me as role models either. And although I always had girlfriends, I much preferred hanging out and partying with the guys. And I took kind of an internal vow that I would never be one of the girls that I heard them talk about in disparaging and disrespectful ways. Girls they just used for sex. Kind of further deepened my own internalized misogyny. And as I grew up and got on birth control and started working, I did a lot of manual labor, a lot of blue-collar work in the trades, house painting, landscaping, printing. Ultimately ended up having my own cleaning business for a long time till I became a therapist. I still miss it sometimes. I like to think I moved from cleaning people's toilets to cleaning their psyches. Sometimes it's not that different. But I liked hanging out with guys and also liked being the only girl or woman. There's some kind of special advantage to that. I love special advantages. I've always been a very sexual person, and I started having sex pretty young. And the Virgin Mary really fell right in the same bucket with my sickly mother and my dysfunctional grandmother. I saw them as weak, powerless, irrelevant even. Nothing I wanted to model myself after. And I could say now that part of my descent into my addiction to drugs, alcohol, food, and sex had a lot to do with my own underdeveloped feminine and my misunderstanding and complete ignorance about true feminine power. And my perspective today is that we all hold masculine and feminine within us. Our internal masculine could be seen as the rational, active aspects of ourselves that really help us be successful in the material world, navigating time, money, material goods, practical things, building stuff, organizing, the intellect, most of what we value culturally. And the healthy feminine, in my experience, is the non-rational, the intuitive, the creative, the relational, the emotional, spiritual, connected aspects of ourselves. The masculine constructs the house, and the feminine makes it a home. The masculine takes on a job or task, and the feminine brings joy, inspiration, fulfillment into the activity. The masculine is the breathing out, and the feminine is the breathing in. And we need both. And for me, there was an incredibly powerful, under-recognized strength in being able to receive and be resilient, flexible, loving, compassionate, truly intimate and connected with others. And years later, I came to realize that love and connection was what I actually craved, but I didn't believe it was possible, so I just tried to trade it out for power. And so when I hit the wall with my addiction, with trying to starve out my own internal feminine and the limitations of a purely masculine worldview, I was forced with my own deep needs for intimate connection and spirituality. And one of my first real spiritual experiences was a visceral feeling of being held by a great mother, this incredibly loving, wise, and powerful maternal force. I envisioned her as a great, fat, ebony-skinned earth energy. Earth is often referred to as Mother Earth. And she had enormous breasts with unwavering and infinite strength rooted in love and compassion. It was quite humbling and incredibly healing to my own mother wound. In fact, over time, I stopped calling my mother mother and just called her Fran, that she was my biological mother, and I came to orient toward the divine feminine as my spiritual mother. And the goddess, the great mother, the divine feminine, became a role model I could sink my teeth into. That was a kind of strength I knew nothing about. Fearless in the face of suffering, steadfast in prosperity and loss, understanding the cycles of birth and death and submitting fully to them. The feminine warrior has a different kind of strength of heart and spirit. And I might have had a lot of spirit, but I didn't have a lot of heart. So my fiance had a good friend who was a priest, and the whole celibacy thing was really weird for me. I actually thought it was creepy. I've subsequently had some periods of intentional celibacy myself, and I have a different opinion, but that's another podcast. Celibacy is complicated. So as an adult, I found myself once again in Catholic church with a friend, and I had this kind of internal spiritual practice with the divine feminine, and the idea of Mary Magdalene had always resonated with me. And Mary Magdalene was one of Jesus's closest friends, perhaps his lover. The book and movie The Da Vinci Code and other lore has them as lovers. She was certainly one of his apostles, and somewhere along the line, it was decided that she was a whore. Now, my understanding of Mary Magdalene is that actually historically, she was probably a wealthy woman and one of Jesus's benefactors. My understanding is that she may have been mentally ill and he cured her. And like many of Jesus' followers, she dedicated herself to him and to his healing work. And the pathological patriarchy of the Catholic Church does not have a good relationship with the empowered feminine, just like I didn't. So during this period of time, I was still cleaning houses, but I knew it probably wasn't my life work, and I was trying to decide if I should be a therapist, a nurse practitioner, or go to divinity school and do some kind of religious service. I knew I wanted to help people heal. I had had tremendous healing happen in my own life, and I watched my mother decompose with a range of psychosomatic illnesses. She spent the last 10 years of her life housebound. She died at 72, pretty lonely. So I was very interested in the mind-body connection, trying to decide if I wanted to help people heal physically, mentally, or spiritually. So I spent a few years taking different kinds of classes, and one of the classes I took was at the Pacific School of Religion. It's a divinity school in Berkeley, California, part of the Graduate Theological Union, which is this really cool organization of 9 different theological schools right near Cal Berkeley. So in this class, Pray Like a Mystic, we got to experience all these different mystical practices. And one of the practices, very common one, was to pick a passage from the Bible and immerse ourselves in it, put ourselves into the scene as if we were a player. and interact with the characters in it. And the passage I chose was Mary Magdalene, the morning after the crucifixion, discovering that the stone in front of Jesus' tomb has been rolled away and the tomb is empty. And then he reveals himself to her first as the risen Christ. It was an incredibly powerful meditation, and it was impressed upon me the responsibility that women have to hold and receive and reveal the deeper mysteries of life. And it's the only time so far I've had this particular experience. A voice spoke to me in that meditation, and it said, "You need to become a Catholic." I had no interest in becoming a Catholic because at that point, the role models, as I understood them for being a female, was to be a virgin or a whore, to be the Virgin Mary or to be Mary Magdalene. And I really wasn't interested in either of those. Felt like I'd already explored the whore thing enough, and the virgin path had no interest. But it was no joke. I ain't telling you it was the voice of God, but it was like, you should become a Catholic. And I was like, really? Okay. And so I did. Took a little time. Spent the next year in the rites of Catholic initiation at this stunning cathedral in San Francisco, which is part of the University of San Francisco. St. Ignatius remains holy ground for me to this day. There's a sacristy in that church, which is like a little side altar to Our Lady of Guadalupe, which is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. Incredibly powerful. It's a seminal spot in my life. So the process of becoming a Catholic was a really powerful, transformative experience for me. I had had a brief but ridiculously bad first marriage. And, when you get married, you take all these vows. And when you get divorced, you just get a piece of paper. And there's no way to disembowel those vows. There's no way to unvow. The Catholic annulment process gave me the opportunity to do that, to unvow that marriage. It was a good process for me. I did it concurrent with becoming a Catholic, annulling my first marriage. I was engaged to the guy with the priest friend. In fact, he was a priest at St. Ignatius. We were contemplating if we wanted to get married in the church. He had gone through the process of becoming a Catholic a few years before. So one of the things that happened for me as I would sit every Sunday in that gorgeous cathedral was that all my deep unworthiness rose to the surface. I would often just sit there and cry. And I found myself most comfortable sitting in that little sacristy with Our Lady of Guadalupe. There's a beautiful poem on the wall there about being held by the Great Mother, and it felt prophetic. St. Ignatius is a Jesuit church, and the Jesuits honor Mary Magdalene as the 13th disciple. She has her own stained glass window equal to all the other guys. And I liked that. It spoke to me. Felt true. But as I contemplated the Virgin Mary and really learned the story, as I did my own mystical prayer about the true nature of the Mother of Jesus, I came to the conclusion that the real story of the real Mary and Jesus is actually much more powerful than that of the miraculous birth. It's a more mature story. It's a more human story. But I think it speaks more powerfully to the redemption and possibility for all of us than the virgin birth. So my understanding of the real Mary, who lived in Nazareth, is that she was a teenage girl who got pregnant, and it was incredibly shameful to get pregnant out of wedlock as a nice Jewish girl. I don't think God needed to form a miracle. There's plenty of willing guys to have sex with the young, pretty girl. So this very nice man, Joseph, was willing to marry her even though she was pregnant by somebody else. There's no secret about that. And Jesus was her bastard son, and everybody knew it. And what was it like in the year 1 in a small town to be strong enough to raise a free-thinking son when you and he have the shadow of public shame upon you? It's a question if Jesus knew who his father was. Seems unlikely, but possible. But Mary raised an incredibly brave and powerful man who changed the course of history, and certainly the course of religion, by having an intimate relationship with God. And up to that point, that was not done. Jesus referred to God as Abba, Daddy. Maybe not unlike myself, finding the great spirit of God as a spiritual family to fill in the gaps where the biological one left holes. And so for me to think of the strength and resilience of the real Mary, raising Jesus as her bastard son, having a bunch more children, supporting his ministry, and watching him be publicly executed. Very intense. And in the early years of Christianity, men and women equally served. It was only much later, hundreds of years later, when Christianity became institutionalized, that feminine power was drained from it. And so for me, the story of a bastard son and his unwed mother becoming the two central healing characters for billions of people across time is much more powerful than a chosen virgin birth. That we do not have to be special or perfect. That perhaps it is through our greatest suffering and difficulties, our own human failings, that the true power can shine through. I know that's been true for me. And so for me, Mary is not a virgin. And her strength, her fortitude, her character, I can hang with that. So that's my Christmas story. If you're interested in finding out more about my 3-month mentorship program in spiritual psychology or how a block of sessions might be helpful in your life, shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. Have a lot of cool stuff in the works. We're putting together a digital course for shamanism for beginners that you can do at home. Shamanic journey practice is really powerful. And my audiobook, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, is almost done. Deep thanks, as always, to my supporters on Patreon. And blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee LaValle McKenna for Spiritual Psychology.